an interfaith suicide prevention talk story. My name is Dennis Hida, and I'll be your host today. Embracing Hope is an interfaith suicide prevention speaker series and workshop. It's sponsored by BDK Hawaii, Hongpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii, and Samaritan Counseling Center in partnership with the Prevent Suicide Hawaii Task Force. We hope that you learn and find something of value today, whether you are a survivor, supporter, or professional. Before we start, some housekeeping information. If at any time you feel distressed or in need of support, use the chat to contact a respite volunteer, inform the Zoom coordinator, or call 988. The information presented is for education and growth and is not medical or psychological advice. This event is not confidential service and your privacy cannot be guaranteed. This event is being recorded and you're welcome to change your Zoom name, but we do ask that you keep your camera on. We want to create an open, respectful space where you can share your story, ask questions, and support each other with grace, kindness, and generosity. Today we have Dr. Deb Gabert serving as our moderator and Dr. Candice Biernesser and Chad Starr as our panelists.
I think that's my cue. I will, and over to you, Deb. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday morning to be here with us. I'm Deb Gabert, and I will be serving as your moderator. I work for the University of Hawaii. I am in the School of Medicine in the psychiatry department, although I am not a psychiatrist. My training is in public health, and what that means is I work on the prevention side of things and the early intervention side. I've been interested in suicide prevention for a long time, partly because I lost my brother to suicide when he was 23 and I was 17. So it does impact us and it stays with us for a long time. But I think it's important for a lot of people that get involved in this work actually do get involved to pass life forward. And we often talk about that role in trying to link up and being able to share and move something forward and do something positive out of a tragedy and a loss that really impacted our lives. So as part of that, I'm an original member of the Prevent Suicide Hawaii Task Force. And in a little bit, we're going to have each person introduce themselves, but I'll share a few slides just to ground us, make sure that everybody always knows what to look for, because that's important in the work that we do. But the intention for today is to really have an open conversation. We have panelists. We hope that you'll send some questions. I have a few starting questions based on what folks submitted when they registered in that. So I am going to turn it over to Chad and then to Candice to introduce themselves. So Chad.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chad Starr, originally from Oklahoma. My family and I moved here. We've been here just over a year now. I'm here with you today because in 2019, I lost my 12-year-old daughter, Sienna, to suicide. So since then, I've just been trying to raise awareness and spread her story and talk to parents and children and just trying to spread the message that you're loved and you matter. So thank you for having me here.
Thanks so much, Chad. Candice.
Yeah, I'm Candice Biernesser. I'm in Pittsburgh, so not there locally, but I have some roots there and lots of people that I care about there as well. I'm an assistant professor of psychiatry at the University of Pittsburgh, and I will ditto what Deb said that I'm not actually a psychiatrist. I'm a clinical social worker, and I also have training in public health. So I do a lot of work that is really kind of bringing teens' voice forward and developing suicide prevention programs, essentially. And I'm a researcher as well. So, and I will say, I've been interested in suicide prevention as well for quite some time. It's something that is really near and dear to my heart. It's something that I feel like is pulling from a lot of different kind of life experiences in my end over time as well. And just something that's really meaningful to have a hand in talking about things like hope, which I really like the name of this, because I think that's fundamentally what suicide prevention is about, is that kind of sense of bringing hope, even at times when it's hard to find that. So I'm happy to be here today and happy to talk with you all.
Thank you so much. So because I want to keep the flow going and an open conversation, I'm going to go through some slides. And if somebody can let me know that you do in fact see slides, thank you. I'm like, and here's my email, or here's everything. Here's my bank account numbers. Who knows what I'm flashing on the screen? But just to go through a few slides, some of the basics. Some of these slides we do share if invited into the schools or community locations. This is a little shorter than that presentation because, again, I'm just trying to give you the real basics, because the intent today is to have more of an open conversation and talk story. But we do want to get sort of these 3 key points, in terms of why are we trying to have this? What are we talking about? And it's really so that we know how to prevent it. And we know how to help ourselves. And every time I say that, it's like reminder to yourself that you too need to do this care. And then usually what brings us is that we do want to, we're trying to help friends or family or others that are struggling. Just quickly, this is data for Hawaii, for high school youth in Hawaii. It's from a survey that's done locally every couple years. The one that was done during the pandemic is not out yet. So we know that about 2 out of 3 students are struggling with their emotional health. It's about, and that 1 out of 3 of those really suffer from kind of key pieces of depression, and that's feeling sad and hopeless and stop doing their activities. Actually, for Hawaii, not uncommon actually for teenagers, that angry forms of depressions is more common than sad depression. So again, this is happening. 1 out of 6 seriously think about suicide. So this is definitely something that's occurring. And 1 out of 7 make a plan. 1 out of 10 make an attempt. 1 out of 30 need medical attention. And this dot here, it's about 1 out of 9,000 in Hawaii that die by suicide. So people are like, why are you starting with this terrible data? And to me, this is a table, this is a picture, this is a black picture of hope in the universe, in our universe, because every single space in between there is a time that we can help, we can intervene, we can recognize something, and we can do about it. So I mentioned my journey began after a death in terms of trying to do something about that. But wow, what if we could get people even before, like really early on? And actually suicide prevention work is moving to preschool and elementary school. So, and it's to build that, right? To really start recognizing it and people recognizing these emotions. And so to me, this is all hopeful, but we also have to deal with where teens are at right now, right? And I think that's why people are here today, because they're concerned about either friends or family now. Because we also expected potentially some college students here. I wanted to just let you know the numbers are not quite as high, but we do still see that, and 1 out of 4 college students are struggling with a mental health disorder. And 40% don't seek help for that. So that's really where we're seeing these disconnects. And I think there were some questions that had to do with stigma. So we're going to get to that during our conversation. Just a few things people often ask. One is they're concerned that I'm going to put something in somebody's head if I talk about it. And we know that talking about suicide does not cause someone to become suicidal. And in fact, if we talk about it, we can actually get them to help. So it's super important to have these conversations. We also hear that people are just looking for attention. And we want to say that if you see something, take it seriously. And again, that's another time when we recognize these things that we can connect people to help. Additionally, people wonder, well, are they even talking about it? Well, surprisingly, most people actually are talking about suicide, and they do say something. This is not across the board. Not everybody's the same, but it's about 2/3 of adults talk about suicide. It's even more young people, right? 85% of young people are telling somebody. Who do they tell? Often it's their friends, and it's not an adult. So often it might be talked about with their friends, and increasingly through social media. So if you hear someone talking about writing or speaking about death, dying, or suicide, we want to get them to help. And then most people actually have a untreated mental health disorder. It's not recognized until after the fact, and people start going back and saying, oh, what was going on? Oh my gosh, oh yeah, they did seem like maybe they were withdrawing. I just thought they were, blowing me off, or didn't want to have to do anything with me, or whatever, right? Like there's all these different things that go on. We recognize it after the fact. But there is effective treatment. The treatment works, talk therapy works. Some people need medication, medications work, talk therapy and medication also work. It takes time, it's not going to be immediate. But we do have things that there are the right match and the right services for folks. So we want to share those things. So what are the risk factors? So I told you I would let you know these. And I really don't like to spend a whole lot of time on risk factors because although we can recognize that they're happening and check in on people, a lot of times there are things that have already occurred. And so I usually just think of them in big terms. If you have suffered from loss, whether it's loss of a relationship through a breakup, or maybe a family change, it could be a move, which we know in some of our military families, right? Or their parents are deployed, or if you're being bullied, and that's a loss of a reputation, or maybe you're being excluded, right? So you have that loss of those friendships, etc. You could have loss of your physical health or your mental health. So loss is kind of that overarching term that we use when we think of risk factors. These are not causes, right? Just want to put that word out. And then protective factors is all about connection. So lots of different things, but if you just remember one word, any way that we can connect. So if you can connect to at least one adult, one other person, connection to the family, connection to your school, you feel connected to your community. Locally, we'd often talk about being connected to place, right? Connection spiritually, all of these types of connections, right, fit in our protective factors. I want to make a note about social media because everybody has an opinion about this, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about it. But based on national surveys, about 94% of students are using social media in high school and college. Actually, most people find that it helps them and they feel more connected when they're on social media. But for some people, they end up feeling left out. They end up feeling like they're not enough, or they may be cyberbullied. And so it's really about balance. I bring this middle picture is a picture from social media. You may have seen it. It was posted on somebody that I followed, was a friend of my son's. And this was when he was in middle school. And his friend posted this picture, and it says, Tetris taught me that when you try to fit in, you'll disappear. And I thought, wow, that's so deep, right? Like I kept thinking about it. I was like, whoa, what does that mean? Wow. And I got to write something. I'm going to go back on that. I'm not going to, I'm going to put something. And I went back on, and it said, like I said, I'm better off dead. And I was like, oh my gosh. I work in suicide prevention. Something about the picture grabbed me, but I didn't know what it was. And then he went out and was a little bit more obvious about it. And I was like, oh yeah, feeling like you disappear, feeling like nobody sees you, feeling like, right, like all these things, perhaps that is something. And so to me, it just kept a change, and I reached out to him and he got help, and et cetera. The other thing that I'm seeing increasingly on social media is this whole thing about toxic positivity. Just briefly, just want to flash it up there, but is there always a need to be smiling? When I talk with youth, one of the things that comes up over and over again is that, yeah, I'm posting smiling pictures. That's because I'm just really getting good at hiding how I'm doing. Because the expectation is there, and we'll talk more again too. Panelists, please beware. Expectation is going to be, and pressures are going to be one of the big areas that I want to talk about. All right, so what are the warning signs? So different from these risk and protective factors, warning signs are really these changes that we're seeing. And so when we see mood changing, not just like, oh, you know, a flash anger, I'm upset about something, or how could somebody do that? But when that's persisting day after day, you know, somebody's being really worried, we're really feeling scared, really either sad or angry. Those are kind of the big emotions that we see. Or it could be a mixture, right? They're crying one minute and then they're doing, you know, then they're angry, and then something else is, you know, you don't know what's going on, but it's happening and it's lasting a long time. That can have impact on our behavior. And so we'll see people, I don't care to take my shower anymore. I'm not sleeping very well. My eating habits are all over the place, right? But it's changed from what we're used to seeing. And we also see a pickup in risk-taking behavior. So could be driving fast, could be using more substances, could be increasing sexual partners, right? Like you'll see something happening different from somebody's norm, real change in behavior, trying to feel like they're alive by really pushing those boundaries and those limits. And then the third thing that people are talking about, death, dying, or suicide in many different ways. As I said, locally, it's often less direct. So they might not say the word suicide. They might say, I'm a burden to people, or you won't have to worry about me anymore. And those types of more indirect sayings. So what can you do? This is our number one thing that we like to promote, is that you can listen, or ho'olohepono, meaning to listen well. We have different ways that we think about it, but I actually like the kanji form of the word. That it's, the word listen is actually made up all the ways that we need to remind ourselves to listen well. Right? So we use our ears to hear, we're not speaking, our eyes, our undivided attention is there. We're feeling it through our heart, our gut, and our mind to process and reflect on what people are saying. If you don't already, please put all of these numbers into your phones. We have 24/7 resources. Why are those important? Because oftentimes when people are struggling, it is in the middle of the night when they're sleeping, not sleeping, thinking about things. Maybe can't get a hold of somebody. I have a nephew just reached out to me. He said, yeah, I'm struggling again. Can you bring your phone by your bed? So he does let me know that he's having tough times. And that's, of course, after been years of processing and working on this. And so I do, because he knows I keep my phone in my kitchen to charge. And so it's not usually nearby, but when he's having tough times, I bring it into my bedroom and it's there. But there are always these numbers available to you. And there's some great websites for kids and teens and young adults. This Sees the Awkward actually does some role playing and people like it. And then there's now actually helps build skills. So how can you talk to your friends? So they're really good sites. So just want to mention those to you all. And then lastly, just to round out the key things we talk about in these presentations is that we need to take care of ourselves to take care of others. We need to take care of ourselves, even if we're not taking care of others, but somehow if we have it in mind that we're going to take care of others better, that's easier for us to grant ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, which we're not kind enough to do. And that can look like many things and be different depending on how you're doing. So sometimes we want calming activities and sometimes we want energizing activities, right? Or sometimes we need to be creative and sometimes we need to concentrate. So having a whole different spectrum of things that you can tap into is helpful. Though this one here on the left was actually developed by one of our teen groups, one of the high schools on Maui. And I have just one more slide for you all. And that was just a reflected back to be gentle ways to fill your cup. And again, remember, it doesn't have to be long, but we do need time every single day where we're spending time on ourselves. So that is the key things that I wanted to share. And then I wanted to open it up. And I did look through questions that folks had posed previously. So one of the questions that was listed, and maybe everybody can answer, and if folks here, we're a small group, so please feel free to chime in as well after our panelists have spoken, if you have something additional you want to share. But the question had to do with stigma and how do we really reduce stigma in our schools, in our communities, and in our homes, and what can be done for that surrounding suicide.
Should I go first?
Sure, you're unmuted, good to go.
I mean, my opinion on it would be, just talking about it more and making sure that people know that they're not being judged when they do talk about it. Or I know for me, I was always worried about talking about suicide because I was worried that my kids were going to be taken away from me. I was worried about expressing what I was feeling, and because I had, I'd grown up thinking that it wasn't okay to talk about it. So I held it in, and it wasn't until I started talking to other people and learning that, everyone is struggling. That's when, for me, it made it easier to talk about. And I think that's just what we need to do. I think the more we normalize talking about it, the stigma will slowly fade away.
Yeah, I think those are there's so much about normalizing and normalizing having conversations about it, normalizing seeking support that I think are so important. And part of that, when I think about it, is flipping some of the narratives that we have in our head about seeking help is a sign of weakness, maybe, or seeking it's not appropriate to talk about these things, or it's going to burden other people. And I think a lot about when we're going through something incredibly difficult and, we make that decision to reach out in the midst of that, that's actually one of the strongest things that we can do. So I think there's something to be said about flipping that narrative from weakness to strength, and also, recognizing in those moments that's the most important, thing in the room, and really having space to receive that if you're someone who's hearing about that too. I also think for those of us, and I was thinking to some degree, some of the youth here might be in a mentorship type of role with others, that it can also be about creating environments of trust and understanding, kind of on a regular basis, not necessarily just in a crisis. So reaching out to others preventatively, know that I'm here for you no matter what. I won't judge you. If you want me to be there to listen, I'll listen. If you want distraction, I'm there for that too. Just those kind of, conversations to let other people know that you're there. And we're not always perfect in figuring out how to talk about these things, whether you're expressing it yourself or receiving that information. But I think when we're proceeding in a way that we're showing, empathy, working to avoid judgment, and just being kind of consistently there, it really can make a world of difference.
So some of the youth in our community have reported to us that if they say anything in their household, that they'll get lickings, or that that it's really not talked about. And so how do we approach it in those types of settings?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of youth that have that are thinking through who exactly they feel comfortable talking to. And for some of them, for example, I work with a lot of youth who identify as LGBTQ in different ways, and sometimes they feel more and less comfortable talking with parents. And there's a lot of different reasons. But one you said is definitely a really important one too. And I think we do need to have more open conversations in order to kind of change those narratives. And in the short term, it can be helpful to think about who are other people that I could potentially feel comfortable talking to. Is there that sometimes there's that teacher that you just feel really close with at school, or there's someone else in the family, like a supportive grandparent or a neighbor, or it can even be those crisis hotlines if there's they're actually a really wonderful source of support. So I think sometimes it's being creative and finding a space that feels comfortable and okay to move forward.
I don't think I could agree anymore. I mean, that one's a bit challenging for me because I'm so open with my children, and I want them to. I'm sometimes told I overshare, but I want my children to overshare because, like you said, they'll talk with their friends about anything. So I try to build that same relationship with my children because I was told when I was younger, or I heard people say, don't be friends with your kids. And I couldn't disagree more because, I'm so set on your kids tell their friends everything. And I want to hear those things. I want them to feel safe enough to know that they can talk to me about that. And I think that part of what I'm trying to do is try to get that message out to parents that, we can't be closed-minded as parents. I mean, you really have to open up and be willing to hear things that maybe you aren't used to hearing, or maybe, your kids are thinking things that you might not have thought as a child. And we have to understand as parents that we evolve, and everyone's evolving, and, what was normal to you then might not necessarily be normal to them now, so I think it's our job to get that message to the kids, that there's people out there that do care enough to listen to you and aren't going to judge you. And we have to get that message out there to them.
Yeah, I love that. I think I have a almost 21-year-old son. And I try to be an understanding mother, but I understand I am also a parent and maybe feels like I'm judging. And when we ask the groups, at least that I work with across the state, they say, oh, but grandparents, that's where you can always go, right? Non-judgmental. And so when we talk about judgment and pressures that youth and teens have, many of those are we actually did this exercise, and we're like, okay, well, who bullies you the most, right? And we're trying to get at this whole idea that it's oftentimes people closest to you that know how to really hurt you, and that can be where that comes from. And more than half of the teenagers that I've worked with have said, I bully myself. So these expectations, and their expectations from individuals, expectations from parents, expectations from schools. How do you feel that fits in, and what are some solutions that we can have for managing and balancing these expectations? And again, I mentioned social media, another place where some of that may be even coming in. So.
Well, I mean,
I know I'm not throwing out easy questions here.
So I love social media. I really do love it. But it's definitely a love-hate, because so many people, myself included at times, are living a life that's not completely true, as far as we don't share the bad. And so a lot of kids will see that and think their life is perfect. Why do I not have that same life? Or why is everything not perfect in my life? Because that's all that they're seeing. So, with my daughter, my son's a little different. He's 17, and you know, I'm fortunate enough to have amazing kids. So I get to trust my son 100%. I mean, he makes great choices so far, and I have a 9-year-old daughter. So, kind of going back to what I said, as far as like my wife will say, well, I didn't have a phone when I was younger, and well, no one did. People had bag phones and things like that. So that comes with evolving and things like that. So like you had said earlier, I believe 94% of kids are on social media. So, that is our new normal. And but with that, with my daughter, she gets 2 hours of screen time a day. And then on the weekends, it's a little more. I don't allow her to have certain apps, which is a challenge. And she just brought it up again yesterday. But I know what's on there, and if the bad outweighs the good, it's hard to say, okay, here, you can have it, just to fit in, right? And thankfully, I have an app that tracks a lot of stuff that she does, and it uses an algorithm to look for keywords like suicide or self-harm, or it checks for bullying or cyberbullying, things like that. So, but again, I do love social media because I use it to, spread kindness and things like that. But also, I think we really need to talk to kids and tell them that, all these people have problems just like us. They may not be the same exact problems, but you can't, or try not to base your happiness off of what you're seeing on social media. And I think that would help a lot. So.
Yeah, no, I love that, thinking about where it is, what you're thinking about in terms of how you're evaluating your happiness, and if that's coming from other sources outside of you or from you. And yeah, I think I was thinking about your question, and just globally, there are just a lot of pressure on teens today from so many different sources. And I hear about that, a lot too. And we talk a lot about ways that we can practice some self-compassion of, sometimes we can be our own worst critic, across the board, whether it's social media or not. And thinking about sometimes some, what are some things that my friends like about me or think that I do well? What are sometimes if we can think about it in that kind of lens, we can get a little bit of perspective of like, what are the people who care about me? Like, what are some things that they think of my strength, my worth? And you can sit with that for a little bit. Those kind of, combating some of those negative thoughts is just a really important, I think, life skill in general. And I think specifically in regard to social media, I do research around social media and suicide risk in kids. And we talk a lot about being mindful of how you're spending your time online. That, I agree with what Deb said. It's about balance at the end of the day, that it's not necessarily good or bad, but it's how you use it. So when, think about who are those people in your life that might be more negative, or it might be just when you see their content, it kind of brings you down, where who are those people in your life that are really supportive, opportunities for connection, maybe learning things about your community. With some of the teams that I've worked with in particular that are even at high risk, that are in treatment for things like suicidal thoughts and behavior, they talk about how for them, there's a lot of things that happen online that aren't great. And at the end of the day, if it was taken away from them, it would be really challenging, because that's actually the primary way in which they're actually giving and receiving emotional support from others. And I think that's something that really kind of stood out to me, and that I think about a lot. If you can find that kind of protective space, that's a close group of friends that you trust. It's kind of like having a close group of friends that you trust in person, and so finding those protective spaces and really dialing into those and being aware of more of those spaces that either, people who maybe are saying not so great things, or just those kind of like, I'm doing a lot of comparison and it's not good for me. So, you know, there's the cool thing about social media is that there's all these ways to kind of block and filter content. And sometimes you can do that without the person officially knowing that you're, you know, unfriending them or something, but you can just block or unfollow or things like that for a little while. And just thinking about it as another kind of extension of self-care, that this is something that I'm doing for myself. And, you know, taking that kind of initiative and in action can feel like a really positive step.
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing those up. I actually have a niece right now. She was telling me she had this super hard assignment and she was asking me for help. And, you know, and she's like, yeah, you're a psychology major and you can help me with this. And I said, oh, well, what is it about? She said, oh, we're doing a unit on self-love. And I was like, okay, that's great. And then I found like that's being introduced also in the some of the high schools locally as well as a unit. And I was like, I never even heard of that as something, you know, certainly. So good evolutions are occurring, right? Like to think about that. And we use that term self-care, and it's like, well, is that relatable? Is that something that people understand? I think they understand it when we talk about it. And you know, my niece is always telling me, oh yeah, I listen, you know, self-care is important. And I'm like, well, where did you get that term from? Is this a way that's relatable? How do we talk about these types of things, about self-love, about self-care, without sounding, you know, like, I don't know, like in a way that makes sense to the group that we're trying to talk about it with, right? So that we can get buy-ins. And one of the questions that came out is that people want to have these conversations, but there is a lot of fear in opening up these discussions. They don't want to trigger someone. They don't want to make it a difficult conversation, but a supportive conversation. And I think already people alluded to the safe spaces, but how do we create these safe spaces in multiple places, in particular in the school, because I think that's where they spend a lot of time. So there's a need there, but also in other areas, so that we can have the difficult conversations, but also introduce some of these things that are, you know, ongoing good skills to have. And when as I mentioned, the work is going earlier and earlier, but we still have a lot of kids. If 2 out of 3 are struggling with their emotional health and they're not sure what to do with that, we've got to spend a lot more time on that. So broad, creating safe spaces for conversation topic area.
This one's challenging. In 2019, when I lost my daughter, I tried going to the school that she was about to attend, that my son was attending, and I had a lot of pushback. So much that the school wouldn't allow, the principal didn't want the students to wear a shirt with my daughter's picture on it, because he said the first day of school is supposed to be a happy day. That's what he said to me. Now that was in Arkansas. Things are a little different there, and it seems like everything comes from the East and West Coast and meets in Arkansas, so that the last two, you know, it's like with everything. And so I really struggled with, you know, I knew what my mission was like, I knew that kids were struggling. Obviously, you know, if my daughter did that, I know that another kid was struggling, and there had been a suicide around the same age 2 years before her, and it's a pretty small town. But you know, there was just, what I was told was, there's a lot of things we can't talk about because we don't want to trigger someone. And I thought, you know, you're worried about triggering some people, but we're just ignoring a lot of people that are really struggling and need to be able to talk about these things. And that's why I feel teachers are so important, because they spend so much time with children, with our kids. And so, I had to create that safe space at home. And that's when I really started. And I felt like I hit a brick wall, and I could only do so much, because I quickly realized that when it comes to smaller towns, it's all about who you know, or it tends to be, right? And it takes someone very important for there to be change, that just from my experience. And a year after I lost my daughter, there was a well-known doctor in the town, and his daughter took her life. And a lot of people reached out to me because of everything that I had been trying to do, and unfortunately, because of who he was and things like that, it got swept under the rug, and they didn't want us to talk about it. And so it made me want to talk about it more. So I just kept going, and I luckily I got support from the mayor and things like that, but that's what I had to do, was create my own safe space at home. And I wish I had more to say on how to do it in schools, and I think the only way we can do that is by educating the educators, and talking to the teachers and the staff, and letting them know how important it is to see the signs, or to be looking for the signs. But again, for me, for our safe space, I'm just all about letting my kids know that I'm not going to judge them. There's nothing they can say to me that's going to, if they're sharing their true feelings, I will not be angry, and I'm not going to judge them. And I need them to know that I care about them deeply. And even their friends, I tell them, hey, my daughter actually, I was looking through my daughter's text messages a couple months ago, and I saw that one of her friends was talking about taking her life. I immediately reached out to the principal at the school she was at, and within that day, she had help. So, and this is a bit funny. Her friend found out that it was me that, had contacted someone to get her help. And when she called my daughter, she said, "Oh, so you're the reason I got help." She was a bit upset, but also, she's doing much better now. And also that family now knows that their daughter was struggling, and they're talking to her about it, and they got her help. So sometimes it takes things like that to happen, but hopefully now she has a safe space, with her family and things. So again, it's all about talking about it, and just letting them know that it's okay to talk about, what you're truly feeling.
Yeah, thanks.
That was such a powerful example of, I think, what it can look like when you have, you created a safe place in your family, but also, for, your kids' friends, and, just kind of going further than that, and being, a voice for change. It's just, I just really appreciated that stories. And I do think that there's a lot to say about talking about it. And I think about in the schools, really thinking about it universally, like that this isn't just a conversation that comes up in health class or whatever that is, but this is really something that all of the teachers, all the administration, everyone is on board with. And there's kind of comprehensive approaches in terms of how we can think about managing it, and especially in response to, if there is a death, having a way that supports the family, that supports the students, that supports the community. Those things are just so incredibly important overall. I think about how many kids I talk to, that just how meaningful it is to have even just that one supportive person in a school. Sometimes it legitimately just takes one person, and them allowing that kind of open space. Maybe it's a free period. And I remember this when I was in school, that I had a choir teacher that I would come down and we would sing half the time. The other time we would just kind of talk about life. There's there's so many, kind of nice opportunities within schools that they can be such a really great preventative kind of space. The other thing I think about is that sometimes taking the lead from teens themselves too. We have a program here in which we, really worked with teens, and they came up with their own program about addressing stigma in the schools, and they, are writing, letters to different, superintendents and putting on community events and things like that. And anytime that it doesn't have to necessarily be that something that's that built out, but anytime that we can kind of incorporate teens, I think in the solutions that we're talking about, or young people in general, and kind of leverage some of those connections that we have of like thinking about, are there college students that can talk to high school students, things like that, about some of the experiences, and really kind of broadening the way that we think about it, to, really cover that this is something that is universal in general, and thinking that some of these skills that we're talking about too, about, you can call them coping skills or self-care training, whatever you want to call them. But at the end of the day, I think of them as kind of a birthright. It's not, these are ways that we can help our bodies, at times when we're going through stressful times, that we can actually do something to change how we're feeling. And the more that we can think about it that way, that it's not just like an adjunct, but this is something that should be for everyone, I think it could really make a difference.
Yeah, thanks. So Darcy put in the comments that people have problems with the idea of going to or helping in self spaces because they don't like the idea that they don't know everything or can't fix everything. And I think that's something maybe we can focus on this, that is this a place people are going to be fixed? And it's this needing to be vulnerable with others and sharing, right? These connections are formed by opening ourselves up to others, right? And allowing that's part of contributing to that safe space. And they need to present their own feelings and others' vulnerabilities, so they prefer to avoid it, which doesn't make any of the feelings go away, of course. So so that idea, so some of what I think you touched on, because you both gave examples of, we think of these safe spaces as having to be very structured or a organizational capacity, particularly when we think about it in schools. But there are instances where, we know which teachers kids go to. They can all tell you where to go, because, and that's not for everybody, because there might be somebody else, right? I know we did a project and we asked people who they were supporting, and the security guard was so excited because he had received a number of these thank you postcards as being the person the kids felt most comfortable with. So it doesn't have to always be, right? In fact, they say it's not necessarily the counselor. And maybe that's some of the stigma, because if you're seen going into the counselor's office, that has its own, where you can go into a teacher's office or go talk to the security guard, and there are people are like, oh, they're talking to the security guard, right? And it's like almost a bravado type of thing, perhaps. And then Chad, some great examples of how we do it in our home, and not just with our own children and family, but what we call our extended families, are the friends of our kids, and that goes out so far, right? So, but can you kind of maybe address this idea? Is the role of a safe space to fix, to listen, to, what level of support are we really looking for? So I think it's to alleviate that's not what's needed, right? I mean, it's not so much about fixing. There are places to get help to assist someone if they need additional support beyond what you can provide.
Well, I mean, for me, it is just about, a big part of it is letting my kids know that I'm there for them no matter what. And it's obviously there's levels to it, right? I mean, your kid could just be wanting to talk to you because they were bullied and they need that validation, and that's what I'm there for all the time. I'm here to validate you, as long as you're not wanting to hurt yourself or things like that. Like and I try to do that with my daughter, and I don't always have to agree with what she might be saying, but I need her to know that she can talk to me about it, and together we can. I try to give her examples of why someone might have said something, or I try to look at it from their point of view. And so I really am there just to, unless she needs immediate help, I'm there to listen to her and validate her. Because I think the loneliest thing when I was younger was talking to my parents about something and feeling like something that meant a lot to me, right? I mean, it doesn't have to mean as much to an adult as it does to a child, but talking to my parents and then feeling like they were either too busy to listen to me, or that it just wasn't that important to them in that moment. So again, like for me, I'm there to listen to her and my son. He doesn't talk as much, but my daughter loves to talk, and so I'm there to listen to her, to validate her, and if she needs help, she needs to know that I'm going to get her the help that she needs. And I had shared with her teacher this year that that she had lost a sister to suicide. So I let her know, hey, if she's showing, any signs of sadness or anything, it might be because of that, because sometimes if they'll be reading a story where there's siblings involved, and that's a trigger to her. And I've received 3 messages so far this year from her teacher letting me know that she had something happen and she was feeling a little down. So she pulled her aside and talked to her and gave her some time to herself. And that is just, that's beautiful to me, that she cares that much. And so, yeah, that was just a long way of me saying that I'm here to validate her and just listen to her.
Well, I think it brings also the point, when we talk about some of these trainings and why we want to do these conversations and whatever way we're having them, is that the more eyes and ears we have on somebody that's struggling, the more we're going to be able to assist, right? Because you might not have seen that, because when she came home, that may no longer have been present, or then maybe they're hiding it from you because they think you had a hard day, or right. And then I think Darcy also put in, and maybe it might reflect poorly on the family, and so they don't want you to know that it's reflecting that way, right? Like there's so many different things, which goes back to that expectation and those pressures, I guess, right? Like if we're really trying to meet everybody's expectation, I think that's impossible. And in fact, I think at some point I said, oh, I was getting so stressed out, I stopped worrying about being a perfectionist. And they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I think it was like I hit some kind of point and I was able to, and it happened, but it was, it was a very intense moment. And I was able to release that through some help. And it's never come back. So hope nobody wanted it, because I'm not bringing it back on my own side. Right. But like, how do we get through that and juggle all of those different things? But we need lots of eyes and ears, and so many different places. And so that whole, I don't know, village to raise a child concept, which I generally think has been overused, but definitely needed, it is an approach that needs to be taken. And therapy is different from, I think, a lot of what we're talking about. I know, Candace, you're a therapist, but it's really, there's a lot that can be done with just that support of an adult, or support of right? Like really where people are bringing just that I care about you. And some folks do need more than that, but a lot of times it is just expressing care.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people that all the time. I'm like, I've had a few therapists, and my therapists have therapists. It's so important to have someone that you can talk to, and for me, it is. And my wife is a little different. She doesn't like to talk about her feelings as much, so I'll get some out of her, I would say once every 3 years. But we've all been in and out of therapy, and my daughter now, I mean, she'll see the counselor from time to time, But yeah, I couldn't agree more that just having someone to talk to is so beneficial, and it's helped me so much. And but also, my favorite thing is when a therapist recommends a book for me to read or listen to. And I love self-help books. And that's what's really helped me grow too. And I'm trying to introduce things to my daughter for her to read, that she can understand. But yeah, I just think that having someone to talk to is just the greatest thing.
Yeah, and actually I received, there's a comment coming through that knowing that someone else knows who we are and all our imperfection and likes us anyway is really, yeah, I don't know if there's anything better than that, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've
yes,
said,
yes, I agree.
I've said that, broken people deserve to be loved too. I mean, we're all just trying, to get through life. And one thing that helped me was when I realized if you really dive into it, things are pretty complex. And when I was able to step back and see things that way, I didn't get as stressed as easily. And I was able to just kind of work through things better. And yeah, I mean, we're all just trying to manage this wild life.
I really just love the comment they made a little while ago, Deb, it's all about caring at the end of the day, which I think is just so integral to all of it. I had this, it was my very first clinical supervisor when I was trying to think like, how do I be a safe place, for other people? And she was this she was a very kind of sage-like wisdom, just kind of imbued from her. And her comment was, just care about people and they'll know. And it's been a little bit of a mantra, for me to think about that. Like, and I think, the more people that we have around to listen and to hear about our perfection, at the end of the day, just to care about us, we're in a better shape. So I think, there's safe places. I think of them almost as like care networks or something like that too. It's extending opportunities to receive support, definitely beyond, if you could be in therapy once a week, but sometimes things happen on a Tuesday night. You just talk with them. I mean, there's so many different kind of just really great opportunities to kind of use the people in your natural environment who really do care about you.
Yeah, I was doing, it was for Suicide Prevention Month, and we were doing an activity with youth, and we were creating pocket pebbles, which were like these glass beads, and people were writing messages on them that they could either carry in their pocket to remind them or to give to somebody else. And there were some of the beads were broken, and I was going to dispose of them, and I got yelled at. I love it when they put me in my place. Like, why are you getting rid of those? They're like, these are perfect for certain messages. And they wrote, you're not broken on some of the, and then they wrote, I love you the way you are. And I was like, okay, I'm even getting chicken skin again, because I was like, what was I thinking? Trying to get rid of those. Because they were perfect for the messages that they wanted to share. Yeah, I just think of just little things like that in terms of those caring, I hope you make it safe home. They were really in the now and the moment in terms of sharing those. And I think oftentimes we get caught up in where we want people to be and not where they're at. And that's one of the challenges that we face. And I was trying to bring it to, especially when someone's struggling, that we really need to be in the present. And the present can be very short term. You're good, you're okay right now, you're safe right now. And we're not always having to look into, I don't know, since I'm told by my son that I'm always planning his life, but many years, that sometimes we just need to be focused on now.
I wanted to add, so back in Arkansas, when everything had happened with my daughter, there was a couple that had This movement had started somewhere else, but they brought it to Fort Smith, Arkansas. And all it was just these signs that said, "You matter, don't give up." And, you know, obviously it's important to have someone to be able to talk to. But for me, I remember seeing those signs and it just made me feel so happy, you know, and I had no idea the story behind it. And thankfully I was able to link up with them, and we did a lot more work together. And I love that, because so many people had reached out just saying, "Hey, I was having a horrible day," and just seeing that, right? Just some positive message can be so impactful. So, you know, but I think it's important for adults, children, anyone, to let them know there's signs out there, you know, just with anything. And I think it's about how you view it or choose to view it. And if you'll allow those signs that you see to make you feel happy, I think that that's great. And, you know, it works for me when I see butterflies. I think of sienna, you know, so just little things like that that I think that we can use to brighten our day.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure we give some time if there's questions from any of our audience members or comments before we get too far into our time. Yeah, Dennis.
So I just wanted to make this comment because I feel like if I were to leave this conversation, not say it, I think it may help somebody. But so my experience was I didn't lose anyone to suicide, but my daughter attempted a few times. And the second time, what happened was we had communicated to her friends. So you know how we're talking about a trusted safe space. So my daughter reached out to a friend when she was in it was an extremely bad place already. And she actually did attempt in this small pocket of time. But we were so glad her friend reached out to us. We had just left the house. We were going to lunch. We had no idea anything was wrong. But when we got that message, we quickly contacted my sister-in-law, who lives close by. She came over. We rushed home. So I just thought it was different. I never heard it at a suicide prevention thing, but not only having, you know, having somebody to talk to, but as a parent, trying to develop a relationship with those people and ask them, even though, you know, there's trust involved, "Hey, don't tell my parents." If it feels extremely dire, like it was in our situation, please contact us. And I think I know it made a world of difference. I don't know what would have happened if they didn't call us and our daughter was just left alone at that time. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that goes back to the, you know, the eyes of ears of all of our caring communities and who that is. And I have several members too in my family that struggle with their mental health, and it is, you know, it's not even predictable. It's cyclical. It happens when it happens, and it can go a long time with nothing, and then out of, you know, feels like out of the blue. In fact, I just got contacted by one of my family members, and then I contacted my sister and said, "Hey, guess what? Are you aware that this happening?" And then I was like, "Oh, I better reach out to his girlfriend," or, "Oh, I need to," like, who's on my list to make sure that everybody knows, because I'm not there right there. And, you know, we just want extra care and just surround them, right? And really provide that. And so thank you, Dennis, for doing, yeah. I mean, you know, to have those conversations and it in all honesty, like the kids that tell us, we'd rather have our friends mad at us than dead. So they're more, you know, when they think of it from that concept, yes, right. It's, yeah, maybe they're mad at you for a little while, but it's something that you really need to share. And ultimately, you know, when they're doing better, and even I showed that one picture, that social media picture. Oh, wow. I did not get a good response. There's some words that I didn't even know. I had to look up. Like, oh, I never heard that before. Like, what just happened? But after he was feeling better, and he was like, "Thank you so much," you know. So it's temporal, it's not personal. It's so hard to disconnect from all of those things, right? Like, wow, it's when it's being vetted at you. But it isn't personal. And again, I think everybody here, I think the reasons you're here, I know it's sort of, we're all in the same place. Yes, we're here because we care. But yeah, it's hard not to take things personal sometimes. So that your daughter had friends that were willing to go above and beyond. Shout out to them. So send my thanks on all of the suicide prevention community's behalf if you still see them. Others wanted to comment as well. I'm trying to scroll through and see if there's other questions or yep. Yeah, Clyde.
Hi, yeah. So I have a question kind of related, but not so much. Actually, I'm wondering about the story of the boy who cried wolf, and how sometimes people will contact other people and say, oh, I'm feeling suicidal, or, contemplating whatever. And then a week later, they do the same thing. And then, a couple of weeks later, you get it again. And, they're not getting the help that they need. And the people that are kind of entrusted to help them in their time of need are like, oh, it's just another scare, but, this happens all the time. So can anybody speak about that?
Yeah, I can comment quickly and others might have comments too, but I think that what's so challenging about this topic is that these thoughts can happen on an ongoing basis. They can be, up and down. They can be, we've looked at this from a research standpoint, they can change even, within minutes of sometimes the severity that there might be and so forth. And for some people who do have them on more of an ongoing basis, sometimes they can be at a lower level for a long time. And, other times it can get worse, kind of quickly. And so it's definitely challenging to figure out, when exactly, what exactly is happening, because at the end of the day, only that person really knows how they're feeling and what's in their mind. And I think just acknowledging the potential that things can change really quickly like that, taking it seriously every time, taking the same steps that you would take every time, and recognizing at the same time that this could be someone who has these kind of feelings on an ongoing basis too. It feels like somewhat of a balance. I don't know. Others have comments that they wanted to make about that.
I can speak on that a little bit, because with everything I've been trying to do and being so open about everything I've been through, people tend to reach out to me. So I've found that, fortunately for me, most of the time people will reach out and say, I'm having these thoughts, and I'll try to talk to them and try to get them help. But I always try to be there for them and try to judge the situation and see it or gauge the situation, and see, where they're at in that moment, and just try to talk to them and talk them through it. And oftentimes, unfortunately, they'll just ignore me after a certain point, because it's almost as if they're wanting a certain answer from me, and I might not have that for them. So I've been on both sides of it, and I've also had someone that would constantly reach out. This happened over the span of about 3 months. They would reach out. I would always respond to her. It didn't matter what time it was, and that in itself can be a bit draining on you, if because sometimes she would reach out at 2 a.m. But I would always respond. And then she did end up taking her own life. So from that, I I looked at things differently because it did feel like, she just was needing some attention. But I think that if you're that far where you're needing that attention, obviously, it's meaningful. And so now I view things a little differently, and I do treat every one of them as it being serious, because oftentimes people won't even reach out at all. So I'm thankful that they are reaching out to me. And because of, I did lose that friend, I do treat them all the same now, as far as I take it serious. Now, how far I'm willing to go with it, that I really base that off of how I'm feeling in that moment, I guess. But I always try to get them help. I always try to notify, either if they're reaching out to me on Facebook, I look for, family members or something like that maybe I can reach out to and say, hey, do you know that they're feeling this way, or the things that they're saying? So I let someone else know that might be able to check on them. But I know exactly what you're talking about, because I had the same thing with my older brother. He would message the family and say, hey, I've done this or this, and send help. And that went on for a few years. And then finally he was able to get some help that he needed. And also, I think he was ready to make that change for himself. I think that that's very important, that person has to be willing to accept the help that is being offered, or be willing to, just help themselves. And that's what it takes. I mean, it's what it took for me. I've had a few attempts, and it wasn't until I put in the effort myself that I was able to, be happier and things like that. So again, for me, I do take them all pretty serious. And I always try to let them know that I'm there for them and try to validate them.
Yeah, thank you. I think the only thing that I would add to that is that when people are struggling with their mental health, that it may feel like they're not doing anything, like they're reaching out and then nothing happens, and then they reach out again and nothing happens. But that actually is part of maybe the symptoms of what they're suffering from. So that there's so much energy that might go into that reach, that then for the next level, for them to call or follow up or do something else, is just so much effort and so taxing that they don't have the energy to do it, or they can't do it. Like they're really just struggling. And so it's, I want to say self-fulfilling, but the symptoms build upon themselves. And if you can't get off the couch and you can't do anything, then you can't get to that next stage. And so you get to another point and you're like, oh, I need to do something. Oh, I reach out to the same person again. Oh, I reach out to that same person again. And so the more that we can really do, some kind of handoff, if we feel like it's too much for us to handle anymore, because we don't want to be insincere. I think that's the word. It comes through. Like if you're feeling irritated, like you might be trying to, like, I'm not irritated, but maybe they're very sensitive. That's another part of that, what they're feeling during that time, so overly sensitive. And so they might detect those types of things. And again, I'm not a trained therapist, and I'm not very good at hiding my feelings. So, so I think that's stuff that we want to be cautious of, and make sure that they're getting help. But it doesn't always have to be you if that's how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Just one last little comment on that. We think about it sometimes as like, rather than thinking about, is this person, kind of seeking attention in this moment? Are they seeking support in this moment? Or, kind of support seeking, kind of intentions with that. And I've definitely, not with a therapist hat on or anything like that, but have talked with people over the course of maybe 3 years. And maybe at the 3-year point, that was the point that it was, I'm going to take this step now to, think about therapy. It's not, none of us really have straight lines for our lives. There can be a lot of different steps. There's a lot of different, concerns and differences and comfort and that kind of thing. So there's something to be said about keeping up the consistency and the mindset of, I'm here to support you, and and for as long as it's needed.
Other questions or comments from the group? Then I will ask if Candace and then Chad, if you'd like to have some closing kind of remarks, and then turn it back to Dennis. What would you like to leave everyone with today? You have an open forum to like share your key.
I just talking about suicide and talking with your children or talking to your parents, it's so important. I've said it so many times, and I'll continue to say that. And that's why I'm doing everything I'm doing, just trying to let people know that it's okay to talk about it. And talking about it has helped me. It's helped me grieve, the loss of my daughter. It's helped me with my own struggles with my mental health. And like I said, I've had attempts, and I'm thankful that, I wasn't successful in those attempts, and I've been able to stay here and raise my children and spread this message to people and save other people, hear other people's stories. And so again, I want people to talk about it. I want parents to talk to their children and make sure that they're doing okay. I want children to feel like they can talk to their parents. And I think that if we could all be a little more open-minded and understanding, and realize that we really are the same. We're not much different from one another. And although we might have been raised a certain way, it doesn't mean that we have to continue thinking those same things. And I think that educating yourself is very important. And it's helpful to better yourself and be open to change. So again, I really am thankful that I've been able to share Sienna's story with so many people, and you all as well. And I'll just keep doing this for as long as I can. So again, thank you, and thank you to everyone for being here.
Thank you so much for being so open about your story. I think that does help others in thinking about how we can talk about it and the ways we can talk about it. So I think that's really
Thank you.
So I first just wanted to recognize that I think it's wonderful that you all showed up on a Saturday, gave some time to really focus on such an important issue. And it's also an important topic. And it's also, I think, for a lot of us, it can feel really daunting, understandably. And I think I'm thinking about how much of that I get a lot of comments about that, like, you do work in suicide prevention. That's such a downer of a topic. How do you do that day in and day out? And I think for me, so much of this work at the end of the day comes back to, finding light at the darkest times and finding hope. And that there's something actually really deeply positive about that. And something that I feel like is more rewarding than anything else that I could have ever, chosen for my life. And so to the extent that, being open and coming, here today extends to openness and other kind of conversations, and not being afraid to ask questions, and I know there's some additional programming coming up after this, which sounds really fantastic. So just for those of you who are going to it, approaching it with an open mind, an open spirit, asking questions and thinking about ways that we can support ourselves and support other young people. I just, it's tremendous what this programming is doing. And so I'm just happy to be a part of it, and appreciated the opportunity to do it.
Thanks so much, Candace, for being here. And guess it's afternoon for you. Yeah, I'm excited about next week. The work that I do is actually usually with youth in particular, and trying to build those relationships with adults. And we do a lot of that through play, because I think if we're out there and we are playing together, then when we're having hard times, it's easier to turn to folks, because you've built that relationship on from a positive place. So I'm going to turn it back to Dennis. I think he has some concluding remarks.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our youth suicide prevention panel. We'd like to thank everyone online, and a special thanks to our moderator, Deb, and our speakers, Candace and Chad. You will receive a follow-up email with links to resources and answers to any questions that we were not able to answer, as well as a link to the recording. High school students and a supportive adult are invited to join our free Sources of Strength workshop next Saturday, September 22nd. You can register at embracinghope2022.eventbrite.com, and it will be held at Community Church of Christ in Kalihi. We also ask you to fill out a short survey so that we can improve future events. Thank you again, and have a blessed and safe rest of the day.